EF21 is sponsored by the Climate Council of Greater Kansas City and KKFI 90.1 FM, Kansas City Community Radio. This is Carbon Footprint Eating. Please welcome your host, David Hakan.
Hi. Thanks for having me on here, Bob. And we're going to go ahead and get started right away. The Carbon Footprint Eating team put together a website that I'm going to share now. And here. And this is not so much a diet as a challenge for people to eat a plant-based diet. And so, yes, it's good for your health, but it's good for the planet. Building a better world, one kitchen at a time. And really, when you think about it, people that want to reduce their carbon footprint, you know, they may be thinking about putting solar panels on their roof if they own their home, but that's a big move. And it's nice to dream about buying an electric car, but not very many people can do that right now. But everybody eats. And so it's something that everybody can do. And it actually ends up saving you money instead of costing you money. And one of the reasons that we started this was that when scientists started looking at what are the most impactful solutions to reversing global warming in 2017, they ran the numbers, over the next 30 years. And not only did they find that, yes, we can reverse global warming with these climate solutions that we have already, but that a plant-rich diet came in number 4 in the top 10 in terms of its impact. So food is critical. And the numbers were that large in terms of, compared to other solutions. Just with looking at people in developed countries reducing their meat intake by half. Not even going vegetarian or vegan. So in designing this website, we decided that we would take people wherever they were and challenge them to just go a little farther. So the challenge we called the Meatless Month for Mother Earth. And this can, for most people, reduce their carbon footprint by about 17%, depending on what their diet is. And it really does put them on a new journey. So what we decided is to have more than one pathway. So we have the Planetarian, Flexitarian, Vegetarian, or Vegan pathway. And it was very interesting to see how many meals of meat per week people were already eating of meat and what their goal was and how far they wanted to go on this continuum. And what we gave people also was something new that hadn't been done before, which was really talk about plant-based protein, where that comes from, how to combine it so that you have the same amount of essential amino acids that you would with a serving of meat at a meal. Your body would not know the difference. And I found in my travels in 2019, as I started to try to not eat meat for a year, that when I talked to people about it, if they were on a meat-based diet, their big complaint to me was, well, every time I look at that, I see fruits and vegetables and salad, and like, where's the protein? I could never do that. So that's kind of our unique slant for this challenge, is giving people lots of recipes that give plenty of good quality protein without meat. And the website is carbonfootprinteating.org. And you can register anytime, and it's a rolling challenge. So we sometimes do a big promo for the beginning of a month, but people start anytime and see if they can go 30 days on one of these pathways. So the Planetarian Diet is something pretty new, and people have put that together in terms of how to reduce your carbon footprint. And their idea is that we're not going to exclude anything. But the stuff that is going to be a higher carbon footprint, you just have smaller portions. So you don't have to give up anything on the Planetarian Diet. And that has really appealed to some folks taking the challenge. Flexitarian, think of flexible vegetarian. And for instance, you can eat meat occasionally. And oftentimes, even if someone is primarily eating as a vegetarian, with friends or family and special get-togethers and weddings and stuff, sometimes you're just not wanting to go through the whole explanation and justifying it and seeming out of place, or making the host feel like, oh, I should have had a vegetarian entree, and go ahead and eat what's served or eat meat, and then the next day go back to vegetarian. The next pathway is vegetarian, and this can be with or without dairy, with or without eggs. And some of the people that took the challenge had already been mostly vegetarian and including both dairy and eggs. And for them, the challenge was to go vegetarian without eggs, or without dairy, or without both. And one of the things we're finding is that both dairy and eggs have a pretty high carbon footprint compared to other vegetables. And the other thing that has in the past been in vegetarian diets is cheese. And we now know that cheese has as high a carbon footprint as meat. So that's been part of the challenge for a lot of the vegetarians that are wanting to do this challenge to reduce their carbon footprint. And then there's the vegan, with no items derived from animals. And this is, of course, the strictest. And it was interesting to see the vegetarians that decided to try vegan for a month, and found that they really could do that. So this challenge allows you to change your diet just as much as you're comfortable with. Because in reality, even eating less meat is a huge way to reduce your carbon footprint, and it's a healthier diet. And instead of going for just, Meatless Monday or a week, we put this for a whole month just because that gives you a real impact for your carbon footprint for the year. And if people go on a plant-based diet for a solid month, most people will notice a real difference in how much better they feel. So there are a lot of charts out there. This is kind of a new thing in the last year. People have taken a look, gotten different kinds of measurements on different foods, and put them on charts to kind of show just how much in relation to other foods some of these high carbon footprint foods are. And so, a lot of people are reducing their carbon footprint by just not eating beef and going to chicken instead. And you can see on this chart how much that would be helpful. And you can see how cheese is way up there above chicken. So they're easy to get. You just Google for charts, and there are some foods not on here, but they will be on other charts. So it's hard to find one that has everything that you're looking for to try to figure out what the carbon footprint is. But it's not too hard to, look at a food that you're thinking of including or taking out of your diet and checking to see what its carbon footprint is. So the Planetarian Diet uses a plate to kind of describe it, and a big helping of fruits and vegetables. One of the keys is a good helping of whole grains. One of the things people forget is that I'm a long distance runner and my dad ran marathons. And most people that are doing that kind of extreme exercise will have whole grains the night before a long run, because complex carbohydrates are what give you the staying power for energy, not protein. And really important for not getting tired, not getting hungry before the next meal, not waking up in the middle of the night hungry. Those are your complete carbohydrates. And you have to work at getting those, because most of the grain products in the supermarket are primarily white flour that is steel milled. So getting whole grain flour that is stone ground, you have to kind of be looking for that. The other thing that's important is your plant sources of protein, which are seeds and nuts, peas and beans, and then also your grains have protein. So those are your three sources for plant protein: is your whole grains and rice and wheat flour and all the peas and different kinds of beans and lentils and all the different nuts and seeds. And you're allowed to have a small helping of meat, dairy, sugar, and starches. So that's the Planetarian Diet. The Flexitarian is vegetarian most days. And it's kind of like you can use meat and cheese as a condiment. Just, where you'd put on a little bit of Worcester sauce for flavor. And you can sprinkle in some cheese to give flavor to an Alfredo sauce, rather than use a whole lot of cheese. And use a little bit of meat in basically a vegetable stew to give it flavoring. Just keep in mind that what we're talking about is reducing your carbon footprint. So really using just a little bit of meat for flavoring, instead of having a portion of meat that day, makes a big difference on that. And with Flexitarian, as I said, you can have meat once in a while. So people on the challenge could say eat vegetarian for 25 days. They've got family in town. They go out and eat meat, and they go back to vegetarian for another 5 days. They've got their 30 days Flexitarian. 30 days without meat. Vegetarian, most vegetarians just do not have any meat. And some vegetarians are still eating cheese, and just kind of knowing that's going to increase the carbon footprint, so use it just as much as you need. And there's so much help out there for going vegetarian. There are websites, there are restaurants, there are YouTube channels. There's just all kinds of resources out there for going vegetarian. And so for some people, it's also the switch to being a vegetarian is often one where people are doing that for their health. Whether they've recovered from a heart attack or their age and are really, or have a sedentary lifestyle and are really worried about, their health. Vegetarian is, there are so many studies showing that the health benefits of the vegetarian diet. And of course there's vegan. And, if you're eating vegan, you're reading labels, because animal byproducts in our regular American food, processed food, is everywhere. Whey that comes from milk is in lots of stuff, gelatin, honey. And so it's almost, the other thing about vegetarian and vegan is a lot of that is cooking from scratch. And a lot of vegans just, it's so much easier to cook from scratch instead of getting something and reading the label. Or if you buy something in the store, make sure it says vegan on it. And that pretty much helps out. And of course, what I love about the vegan community is that it's also a choice of diet based on the belief that animals are not ours to abuse, harm, or exploit. And the vegan community has so much support and so much of a sense of belonging. So many young people are gravitating toward the vegan diet because of the great support groups. No matter where you live, you can find other vegans and get that support. So what we have done is really make it easy for people to not worry about getting enough protein, regardless of which of these pathways. And again, it's mainly the combination of nuts and seeds with the legumes and the whole grains. And there are not only recipes, but rules of thumb for, how much lentils do you put with the rice? Everybody knows pretty much that rice and beans complement the amino acids that are low in one or high in the other, so that you get good quality protein from the essential amino acids. And so I had looked for where someone had redone those combinations for the new science, and found that nobody had really done that since the 70s. So I've put a little bit of mathematical elbow grease and run some numbers to get some really surprisingly easy recipes. One of them is a baked potato. And the protein in a baked potato is really not that good. And so a lot of that, those amino acids are burned as carbohydrates if all you're eating is a baked potato for dinner. But all you need to turn it into really good quality dense protein is 2 tablespoons of tahini. And I'm like, wow, it's just like all across the board, perfect combination with a baked potato. And then I'm going, uh-oh, I need to get some baked potatoes and try this. I have no idea how tahini will taste on a baked potato. And fortunately, it's actually very yummy. And so some are easy, some are more ingredients to bring everything up to stuff. But that's been a really fun journey for me. And I feel so much better now that most of my vegetarian dishes that I eat are packed with protein. So the other thing that we have on the website is some carbon tips, because there's a lot of talk about regenerative farming, and it's really important to support the small farms that are leading the vanguard for regenerative farming, because that is definitely in the top 20 of ways that we can reverse global warming. And so that with managed grazing, often those farms are raising meat and animals. And there is a lot less carbon footprint from animals, the meat from animals that are on either managed grazing or regenerative farming. And so supporting those people along with a vegetarian diet is one way to keep them in business and have more people learn from them to farm the right way. The same with organic. There's a new certification out, which is regenerative organic. And it is out of pilot, and there are several places around the country that are already in the beginnings of the certification. And the first goal of regenerative organic is to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and lock it in healthy soil. Another carbon tip is buying local and in season. That oftentimes something that is grown such that it has a low carbon footprint is put in an airplane and flown across the country or across the globe. And it's really important to limit that if we can. And another huge factor in terms of the carbon footprint is the processing. And so I thought this was really good timing for the carbon footprint challenge, is that during the pandemic, a lot of people have done a lot more cooking and not going out to restaurants. And so it was a lot easier to have them start experimenting with recipes that they would have to cook at home. But the processing and the packaging and the plastic and the cold chain and the refrigeration and the transportation is a lot of the carbon footprint of the food we eat. So here's one of the complete protein recipes. Because peanut butter has a lot of protein, but it's not very complete. And I used to make this with, instead of soy protein isolate, with dry powdered milk. But I wanted to get a vegan version and ended up with a little bit of soy protein isolate. And the roasted sunflower seeds are just like superfood when it comes to combining with other legumes and other grains for increasing the usable protein. And this is really fabulous for having something that's shelf stable, doesn't have to be refrigerated. It lasts a long, long time. And on those days where, like, you have a climate festival and you're just busy all day and you have to rush down to the kitchen and grab something fast, this is good, dense, complete protein. And it's great on celery or as a sandwich. I have been known to grab a spoon and just eat it out of the jar. My kids grew up on this kind of recipe. And what we would do in the summer especially is we would take the complete peanut butter and we would make it into a log like an inch high and an inch thick on wax paper and roll it up, put it in the freezer. And they would pull it out of the freezer and they'd slice off an inch, kind of like a homemade candy bar, and put the rest back in the freezer. And that was just like one of their favorite desserts. So there's a lot of resources on the website, carbonfootprinteating.org, and you can register and start the challenge anytime. And we have some sites on there that really help people. If you want meal planning, there's Cook for Good, and follow that link. And she's done a great job of here's your 3-week meal plan all out. Here's your shopping list for that meal plan and recipes and help for putting it all together. And it's all prepackaged for you. You don't have to come up with, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? And there's another website where you can type in your city, and it will bring up all of the vegetarian restaurants and restaurants that have vegetarian entrees or vegan entrees. They'll bring up the pizza places that have vegan cheese available. And it's just wonderful. You can just put in your location and you can see reviews and menus, and wonderful way to support people that are having restaurants where someone that's wanting to reduce their carbon footprint is welcome. So I have a few more minutes before we're going to open up to questions. So go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about my journey on this, because I started eating vegetarian in the 70s when I read Diet for a Small Planet. It was basically about, we have world hunger at just a terrible level and people starving. And we now have industrial agriculture that is growing food, soybeans and corn, that could feed people. And it's feeding them to animals to produce meat instead of having the animals graze. And it takes a lot of grams of usable human protein to make just 1 gram of meat protein. It's like a protein factory in reverse. And so my family and I were really having fun experimenting with the vegetarian recipes in that book. And so now that we know, a lot of those recipes had cheese, and so now that we know much more about the different sources of plant protein than we did in the 70s, like quinoa and amaranth, I went looking to see who had updated those recipes and combinations, and I couldn't find anybody. So it was like, somebody should do that. Terrible words that come out of my mouth, and it's like, oh, okay, David, maybe you should update those. So that kind of was my obsession with this, and actually had a lot of fun with it. So I've got my chef beanie and my chef coat, because it also works great for a musician, short sleeves. And people ask what restaurant I work at, and I tell them carbon footprint eating, but it's online. So I'm going to go to questions. All right, so we have 3 open. Forks over knives. I know a lot of people that have used that resource and love it. And it's like one of the many websites that are coming up that not only are telling people, hey, this is a way to get healthy, but it also has to happen if we're going to reverse global warming. And one of the things that I've run into in terms of the China study is that yes, protein is not the main issue, especially in our country. That if someone just eats whatever vegetarian dish they want, they will probably end up with enough protein. As a long distance runner, I'm a little bit more concerned about my protein intake. But I know that I don't need nearly as much as like the standard, protein recommendations for my weight. But the emphasis on protein on the carbon footprint eating site keep in mind is for people that have not even tried vegetarian dishes, because their reaction is, where's the protein? I need protein. When you actually look at the amount of protein and essential amino acids that you need for a whole day, it is 5.6 grams. And you have all of the required amounts of all 9 essential amino acids. So, it's like a lot of people have taken the challenge, gone on the site, and haven't done any of the protein recipes, and that's fine. Favorite way to eat locally seasoned year-round? Yes, there are. CSAs are really, I think, the best. It's consumer-supported agriculture. And Catholic Charities has a wonderful program where you can sign up as a CSA member, and you pay the farmer at the beginning of the season. So they have the money to work with. And then every week you get a box with what's coming ripe, what's coming out. So it's going to be, solid stuff at the beginning and the root vegetables toward the end of the season. And it's really tremendous. The other thing is that there are some indoor farmers markets. And there are some greenhouses, like Antioch Urban Growers has a year-round greenhouse where they're growing food. So it is possible. And one of the things I'm going to do in terms of preparing for winter and a plant-based diet is, one of the things when my kids were little that we always did, we had our own organic garden when the kids were little, and we would can in the fall. And people aren't canning anymore. And so I'm going to do a big project where I'm going to teach people how to can again. And say, go to the farmer's market and say, next week, bring me a big box of small cucumbers, and I'm going to make pickles and have them all winter. Or beets, and make pickled beets. Or tomatoes, and make my own tomato sauce to have. And apples. We had applesauce all winter long. That was just like, there was never part of a jar left. As soon as the jar was opened, it was all gone. So that's another option in terms of the winter. But this is, and if you have friends that have been thinking, especially someone concerned about the climate, want to be part of the solution, and are working on solar panels but still eating meat. The Flexitarian is often a way that people say, well, that I could do, because I know I'm not going to be able to go all the way. But I could do that and see how that works. And yes, one of the other things that we did in the winter was growing sprouts. And I've thought about setting that up again. It's hard with being one person, but I am thinking of doing that this winter. And we always did alfalfa sprouts. And now there are all kinds of ways and containers that you can purchase pretty cheaply, and places where you can get all kinds of mung beans and all kinds of things to sprout. And there's even systems where you let the sprouts grow longer, to where they're microgreens. And those are very easy to do just with a sunny window. And you get a little bit of fresh food that way. Again, it's wonderful for your nutrition. So we are right about at the end. If there are any other questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. But otherwise, go ahead and send this link out and let people know about this site. They can go from any city. We would love to have a page for other cities and work with them to list restaurants in their area that they want to support, and other resources and farmers markets. So with that, I will close, and stay tuned for more great presentations. And I will be singing some of my original climate songs on the Sunday night after party concert.